Hello everyone, I'm Mashal Riaz and I'm an Android developer at Gudang Ada. Today we're going to be exploring Android navigation component. So when we talk about navigation, we mean moving from one screen to another. Before navigation component was released, this was handled manually by the developer, either through intents in case of activities or through fragment transactions for fragments. We had to write the code to like handle the UI event, for instance, like a button click, and then write the code to launch the navigation. This would create a lot of inconsistencies within the application because like the developer had to manually handle the back button of the device as well as the up button of the action bar, which would make things a bit messy. But navigation component uh, automates all of this for us. We don't need to handle toolbar navigation ourselves anymore. We just identify the destinations within the app, then the action that would take us from one destination to another, and then simply add the code that connects the user interaction with the navigation. We're going to talk about how this code works in the later part of the session, where you can see how compact or concise this code is. So talking about navigation component, it's basically a collection of libraries, tooling, and plugin that simplifies Android navigation for us. It basically provides a map for all the navigation present in the app, highlighting the destination or the screens, as well as the actions that take us from one destination to another. It also handles backstack for us, which means when we move from one screen to another, we don't have to worry about the previous one. Nav component automatically handles that for us. It also provides us with the flexibility to pop some fragments when we navigate from one screen to another. For instance, let's say you're on login screen and you move to home screen once you log in. You'd probably want to pop login fragment out of the hierarchy of the fragments. Nav component provides a very easy and a very streamlined way to achieve that behavior. It also automates fragment transactions. We just need to highlight the fragment we want to navigate from and the destination that we want to go to in the nav graph, and then call the action in our code. It also handles fragment transitions. That is, when we move from one fragment to another, it sort of lets you identify the transition you want and so that the transaction doesn't seem abrupt. The process to achieve that is very simple and streamlined. Then we also have type safe argument passing. We can very easily send data or arguments from one fragment to another, and nav component provides us with the types with like a type safe way. That is, the destination fragment knows what sort of data to expect. This is something we'll talk about in the later part of the session. It also simplifies deep linking, which is being able to access a deeper part of the application from outside, which is also, again, we'll be discussing in this session. And lastly, it centralizes and visualizes all the navigation related information present in the application. So the next we have the type of views that are supported by Nav component. It works out of the box for activities, for fragments, but we can also extend the library to work with our custom implementations such as custom views. Um, Up until very recently, I was also using intents to launch activities because I wasn't aware that Nav component supports them. So this is also something interesting for me, and I'm going to be exploring this also. Talking about the three parts of navigation component that work together in harmony to achieve navigation. It's important to sort of understand how all of these work together to make navigation actually happen. So the three parts that we have are navigation graph, NavHostFragment, and Nav Controller. This can be a little confusing because all of them contain the word nav, and some of them even existed way before navigation component even came into existence. Starting with navigation graph. It's basically an XML file that contains both a design view and an editor, just like most of the XML files we have in Android. It centralizes all the navigation related information and basically provides a map of your application. You can add a bunch of fragments or activities in the nav graph. Then these destinations are actually called destinations, which means they are places you can navigate to and from. And the arrows over here present in the nav graph are called actions, which display the path that a user can take to navigate from one screen to another. The action lets you define stuff like arguments that you can pass while navigating. The action is what you trigger to sort of make the navigation actually happen. So as you can see in this graph, we have two fragments. One is product listing fragment and the other is product detail fragment. We can see that the product detail fragment is expecting an argument of type integer and the argument name is product ID, and product listing fragment has an action that navigates it to product detail fragment. The next component that we have is nav host fragment. The nav host fragment is a container for fragments. It's basically an area or host within the layout for self-contained navigation to occur, which in a way we're saying that, hey, this is the empty space in which we want to show or display the fragments. It's basically a holder that swaps in and out destinations included in the nav graph. When you navigate from one destination to another, Nav Controller sort of swaps in and out the destination. Here, it's important to note that the nav graph attribute present in the nav host fragment. Sorry, all of these are really because the terms are similar, so they're very confusing. Anyway, the nav graph attribute in the nav host fragment links the nav host fragment with its respective navigation graph. Sorry. The default nav host fragment to attributes ensures that the system back button is intercepted properly. Then we have a nav controller. This is what does most of the work behind the scenes. It contains the logic we need to swap destinations in and out of the nav host fragment. Each nav host fragment has a nav controller that we use in our code. And this is what makes navigation actually happen. When we write this code, we're basically pointing towards the action and instructing the nav controller to swap the current fragment with the one mentioned in the action. That is pretty much it about the navigation component itself. Now let's talk about when we navigate from one destination to another, we probably want to pass some data with it, data or arguments with it. For instance, let's say when we're navigating from product listing screen to a product detail screen, we probably want to send a product ID as part of data. So it's easier to fetch its details and display its details. Data passing is good because and preferred also because we don't have to have like a global data or share data just so two destinations could access it. It sort of also encapsulates our data. We just need to send it from one destination to another, and nothing outside of that scope has access to it. Previously, before navigation component safe Args, we used to use bundles. We would add the arguments to a bundle on one side, then take them out on the other. Navigation component provides a very easier way to pass data called safeguards. It's a graded plugin that lets you enter information about the argument you want to pass in the nav graph and automatically generates code for us to deal with bundles. We don't have to write the tedious code to deal with bundles, it is done automatically for us. But also, all you need to do is declare the arguments you want to pass in the navigation graph. Then it automatically generates code for you to deal with bundles, and it also provides you with type safety, which means that it knows what sort of argument to expect. For instance, let's say in the nav graph, you have declared an argument type Boolean, and you try to pass a string, let's say, it wouldn't compile and throw you an error. In order to implement safe args, we need to update our Gradle dependencies. Adding these dependencies will help create direction classes for any destinations that have actions and for any argument classes that for destinations with arguments. So when declaring the safe arguments in NavGraph, here's how it's done. First, you need to identify the name of the argument, which is what we're going to use to refer to it or to access it. Then the type, which could be a primitive type like an integer, or it could also be a custom parcelable or serialable data class. Then we also have the liberty to define its default value, which is the value when no argument is passed. But this is an optional field. Nav component also gives us the liberty to create nullable arguments, but obviously that's not applicable for primitive data types. So in order to send and retrieve arguments, this is how it's done. You define directions. which is the action you're going to take to send data as part of the method argument. Then on the other side, as in the destination fragment, you retrieve that argument through NavArgs. Pretty simple, right? This is how easy it is to send and retrieve data through Nav component. For the last part of my session, we have deep links. So basically, deep linking is an intent filter system that allows users to directly enter a specific screen from outside the application. So it's basically an ability to access a deeper part of the application without having to clicking through all the fragments in the hierarchy to reach that destination. For instance, let's say you have a login fragment, then you go to home fragment, and then you go to product listing fragment, and then you go to product detail fragment. But if you can directly hit a product detail fragment through deep linking. We need to know that the launcher icon is not the only way to access an Android app. I mean, we have let's say notifications or app widgets or web URIs that take us directly into the specific screen within the app. So there are two types of deep links. One is implicit deep link, which means that they take you to the same static destination within the application. That is, every time you, let's say, click on a shortcut icon, let's say, it would always take you to the same destination. Then we also have explicit deep link, which uses a pending intent to get data present in the deep link to decide what destination to navigate to. So talking about implicit deep linking, it's pretty simple to achieve through navigation component. As you see, I already have a deep link written for the product detail fragment. So one, we need to identify the ID of the deep link. Then we add the action we want to perform when this deep link is clicked. In this case, it's action view. Finally, we have the URI. When we access this URI, it's going to open product detail screen directly for us. You can also see, it's important to note over here is that we have an argument of type integer, the name product ID. Nav component would automatically map the product ID received as part of the URI with the argument, so long as both of them have the same name. That's about it. Let's wrap up. So in this session, we talked about navigation component and its three parts. Then we talked about how navigation component centralizes navigation-related information and how to pass our argument through safe args, and finally how to achieve deep linking through navigation component. That's about it. Thank you for listening to me, and I hope this session, even though it was very basic, I hope it was useful for you. And that's about it from my side.
So here's a question. So is there any reference to navigation animation? Official docs only show slide left and slide out.
I can answer this offline. You can actually also declare your own sort of navigation animation. I can answer this offline. I can just go into my code and paste it over there on how to achieve the animation. Like how can you define it yourself? That sort of thing.
Development is much interesting and easy.
Yeah, that's very true, actually, honestly. Yeah, especially, I think intents were still relatively easy, but fragment transactions were a bit big pain. So yeah.